Buffalo. We need to talk. Because what just happened on that practice field is bigger than a preseason score, bigger than a highlight reel, and honestly, bigger than most of us expected this early in August. The Bills are 2-0 after absolutely thrashing the Cleveland Browns, and look, I get it. Preseason wins don't hang banners. Nobody's popping champagne over a 2-0 preseason record. But here's the thing nobody's talking about enough. It's not the score that has Bills Mafia buzzing right now. It's the tape. It's the development. It's a coaching staff led by the youngest head coach in the entire NFL that is quietly, methodically building something special in Orchard Park. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why. So buckle up, grab your Bills jersey, and let's break down every single angle of this game because I've got 10, maybe 15 clips that are going to make you feel really, really good about where this roster is headed. Let's start with a name you need to burn into your memory right now. Jordan Hancock. If you don't know him yet, you're about to. Watch what happens when Deshaun Watson drops back, and Hancock, reading the play in real time, breaks on the football with an instinct that honestly reminds a lot of Bills fans of vintage Cam Lewis in his early tape. That's not a small comparison. That's the kind of instinct you can't coach into a guy overnight. On one particular rep, Hancock is working press coverage. Gets pushed a little off his spot, but instead of panicking, he reads the route developing underneath and gets himself to the football in the flat. Yes, full transparency here, he missed the tackle. We're not going to pretend that didn't happen. But the read, the anticipation, the closing speed, that's a young defender whose instincts are exploding in real time. And it wasn't a one-off. On another play, Hancock does it again. This time working through not one, but two blockers, a tight end and a receiver, both trying to seal him off on a ball thrown to the flat. Hancock splits them. He gets skinny, gets through both blockers, and even though he doesn't make the tackle himself this time, he slows the ball carrier down just enough that his teammates can swarm and finish the job. That's winning football. That's a guy setting up his defense to succeed even when he's not the one getting the stat sheet glory. If you're a Bills fan looking for a name to get excited about heading into the regular season, circle Jordan Hancock. This kid is not just improving, he's accelerating. Now let's talk about a hit that had Bills X, losing their minds. Ben Van Sumeren, motioning across the formation, absolutely detonates a blocker with a lowered shoulder that looks like it came straight out of a highlight reel from a decade ago. You feel bad for the guy on the other end of that collision. You really do. Because Van Sumeren doesn't just win the rep, he obliterates it, and you can see the opposing player pop back up a beat later, clearly trying to catch his breath after getting the wind knocked clean out of him. It's the kind of physical, attitude-setting play that changes the energy of an entire sideline. And right behind that, Ian Wheeler puts his name in the conversation too, following up with a hard, physical run right through the gap that Van Sumeren helped create. This offense and this defense is playing with an edge right now, and that edge is contagious. Speaking of defense, let's talk about a name that's had question marks hovering over it all offseason. Davison Igbinosun. Last year, if we're being honest with ourselves as Bills fans, our cornerback room struggled mightily against those bigger outside zone runs from opposing running backs. It was a real weakness. It got exposed. But watch what the rookie corner does on this particular outside zone rep. He reads it, fills the alley, and brings down the running back on the boundary. And here's what makes it even more impressive. Igbinosun is one of the bigger corners in his entire draft class, standing around 6'2". There were whispers that general manager Brandon Beane might have reached a bit to get him. But if this tape is any indication, that reach is starting to look like exactly the kind of long, physical corner this defense desperately needed to fix last year's biggest weakness. Next up, a name that deserves way more credit than he's getting, TJ Sanders. Now, I'll be honest with you, this isn't a highlight reel, jaw-dropping, put-it-on-a-poster kind of play, but it's exactly the kind of quiet, winning football that turns a good defensive line into a great one. Watch Sanders line up, get up into his gap, and simply refuse to be moved off the football. The Browns' offensive lineman is trying to drive him off the line and open a lane down the field. Sanders says no. He anchors right there near the line of scrimmage, clogs the running lane completely, and forces the running back to hesitate, which opens up a window for a teammate to make the stop. That's coaching. That's development. And a lot of that credit has to go to defensive line coach Jim Leonhard, who appears to be getting real, tangible growth out of Sanders in this scheme compared to what we saw a year ago. Let's shift over to the backfield, because this might be the deepest, most underrated position group on the entire Bills roster right now. There's real concern that Ty Johnson might not be fully ready for Week 1. Some are even speculating a short-term injured reserve stint to open the season. Normally, that kind of news would send a fan base into a panic. Not this year. Not with this depth. Raheem Davis has been outstanding. Frank Gore Jr. keeps flashing that explosive burst that made his name a fun late-round storyline last year. Ian Wheeler, yes, him again, continues to make defenders miss in ways that feel almost unfair for a guy fighting for a roster spot. And let's not forget, at the top of this room, you've still got the actual reigning NFL rushing champion, James Cook, waiting in the wings. When your question mark depth chart still includes this much talent, that's not a problem. That's a luxury. Now, over to the pass rush, where TJ Parker is quietly having himself a really encouraging camp. Look, the conversation around Parker right now is dominated by comparisons to Caden McDonald, and it's not entirely fair to the kid. But watch this rep. Parker bites just slightly on a run fake, a completely normal rookie mistake, but instead of panicking or trying to force a big splash play, he recovers, stays disciplined, and tails Deshaun Watson step for step in the pocket. Watson, even in a diminished older version of himself compared to his rookie or sophomore seasons, still has the physical tools to make defenders pay for over-pursuing. But Parker doesn't bite. He stays patient, keeps his rush lane, and forces an incompletion with a low probability of connecting. That's exactly the kind of contained, disciplined edge rush you want to see developing in a rookie, especially one who's being measured against a name as big as Caden McDonald's. And now, let's get to a receiver who might be the sneakiest storyline of this entire preseason, Jamori Maclin. This is a guy flying under the radar in a receiver room that is honestly getting crowded with talent. Some are even calling it a 7 or 8 deep group of guys who could realistically contribute to this roster in some capacity. Maclin makes a nice grab on a late, accurate throw from backup quarterback Kyle Allen, showing good hands in a tight window. But the play that should really get Bills fans buzzing came with quarterback Mitchell Trubisky. Let's be precise here. With backup quarterback under center, where Maclin runs a crisp, sharp route, gets a subtle pre-snap communication from his quarterback, and then turns on the jets. He gets hit in perfect stride and simply outruns the entire defense to the house for a touchdown. His lateral agility, his top-end speed, the way he sets up the route to get exactly where the ball needed to be. That's not just good for a camp body. That's a receiver making a real, tangible case for a roster spot on a team that, frankly, wasn't sure it needed another one. And that brings us to a name that Bills fans have loved for years, Trent Sherfield. Wearing number 81, Sherfield goes out and converts a critical 3rd and long on a well-run route that moves the chains. It's not flashy, it's not a touchdown, but it's exactly the kind of dependable, professional play that makes a front office comfortable trusting a guy in big moments. Even if he ends up as receiver 3 or 4 on the depth chart, or even fighting for a practice squad spot. When your WR3 or WR4 conversation involves veterans who can go out and reliably move the chains in big spots, that's organizational depth doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Back to Ian Wheeler one more time, because honestly, this guy deserves his own section of this video. Every single time he touches the football, it feels like he's choosing his own adventure, running through contact, running around defenders, hurdling over guys if he has to. It genuinely does not matter what the defense throws at him, Wheeler finds a way to squeeze out extra yardage on nearly every single touch. If there's a name flying under the radar heading into final roster cuts, it's him. On the defensive side, let's give a proper shout-out to linebacker Joey Drecine, who quietly put together one of the best overall performances on the entire roster yesterday. Watch him diagnose a play early, get himself into the right gap, and finish with a clean, fundamentally sound tackle. For a player who's fighting his way onto this roster from a less glamorous draft position, showing that kind of instinctive, disciplined recognition, especially with a linebacker room that's a little thin on proven depth, is exactly the kind of tape that gets a player noticed by the front office in August. Now let's talk quarterbacks, because this one's going to spark some debate in the comments. Kyle Allen appears to have locked down the backup quarterback job behind Josh Allen. And honestly, it wasn't a guarantee heading into this game. His snaps in joint practices leading up to this contest were a little shaky, a little inconsistent. But on the actual field, in the actual game, Kyle Allen looked sharp, decisive, and in complete control of the offense. So here's the real question for the comment section. Is Kyle Allen your clear-cut QB2 heading into the season? Or are you banking on Shane Buechele's big arm flashes and his added rushing ability to be the more valuable third quarterback on this roster? My take? Stick with Kyle Allen. He's been decisive all camp, and let's be honest, the guy is basically Josh Allen's best friend in that quarterback room. That kind of chemistry matters more than people give it credit for. Now for the part of this breakdown that isn't as fun to talk about, but needs to be said because Bills fans deserve the full, honest picture, not just the highlight reel. Offensive lineman Jude Bowery has had a genuinely rough camp. This is a player Buffalo invested a meaningful draft pick in, somewhere in that fourth-round range if memory serves, and so far, the tape simply hasn't matched the expectation. On one particular rep along the left side of the offensive line, Bowery gets beaten clean, allowing a defender to come through virtually untouched and get a direct, unblocked shot on the quarterback. Now in the regular season with Josh Allen back there instead of a backup, that's exactly the kind of rep that turns into a season-altering injury. Offensive tackles don't need to win every single rep, but they absolutely need to slow a rusher down, buy an extra half second, do something to protect the quarterback. Right now, that's not happening consistently enough with Bowery, and it's a storyline Bills fans need to keep an eye on as roster decisions start coming into focus. But I want to end this breakdown on something bigger than any single player, bigger than any single snap count or depth chart battle. Because what we heard from head coach Joe Brady after this game might be the most important thing that happened all night. Brady was asked about star defensive tackle Ed Oliver, who was held out of this game due to a real, legitimate injury that the team hasn't fully detailed yet, and instead of giving a generic coach-speak non-answer, Brady said something that stopped a lot of us in our tracks. He talked about being what Oliver needs from him right now. Not as a coach barking instructions, but almost like a father figure, someone offering privacy, patience, and support on Oliver's own terms. Whatever that looks like, however Oliver wants to handle it. Think about that for a second. This is a 36-year-old head coach, the youngest in the entire NFL, remember? Showing that kind of emotional maturity and compassion for a player in his late 20s who's going through something difficult. And here's what really struck a lot of us. Compare that answer to Brady's very first press conference as head coach, which, if we're honest, was filled with nervous pauses, filler words, a young coach clearly still finding his footing in front of the microphone. This answer? Completely different. Measured, compassionate, confident. That's not a coincidence. That's growth happening in real time. Right in front of our eyes, in the same offseason we've watched his roster grow. Now look, was Sean McDermott capable of that same kind of compassion? Absolutely. Nobody's throwing shade at the previous era of Bills leadership here. That's not the point of this video. The point is what this moment is telling us about Joe Brady specifically in this specific chapter of Buffalo Bills football. It's telling us that this is a coach who genuinely cares about the human beings in that locker room, not just the players on his depth chart, not just the Sunday performances, but the actual people wearing that uniform. And when you pair that kind of emotional intelligence with everything else we broke down today, the rookie development, the physicality, the explosive playmaking, the disciplined rush lanes, you start to understand why so many Bills fans are walking away from this preseason genuinely optimistic, even knowing full well that none of this counts in the standings yet. So here's where I want to hear from you, Bills Mafia. Drop a comment below and let me know which player from this breakdown has you the most excited heading into the regular season. Is it Jordan Hancock's instincts, Igbinosun's size on the boundary? Or are you all in on this Joe Brady leadership era after hearing those comments about Ed Oliver? I read every single comment, so don't be shy. And listen, if this breakdown got you even a little more fired up about this Bills roster, do me a favor. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel right now so you never miss a single film breakdown this season. We've got a lot more coming in the next couple of days as final roster cuts approach, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. God bless Bills Mafia. Go Bills. We'll see you tomorrow.